Hello, darling. I was thinking some stuff, and it seemed worth sharing. I was thinking about binge watching and binge reading, about how we consume media and how we are intended to. I was thinking about the bad old days, before VHS or DVD, before the streaming services, when we used to be grateful for all the repeats on TV because some of us had missed it. And catching a repeat was the difference between catching what you'd missed and never catching it. TV used to be ephemeral, there and gone. Old shows from the 60s and 70s have missing episodes of which no video survives. It's not surprising, really, when you think that many of the people involved in the TV industry could remember when it had all been live. They'd all been used to each transmission being a moment in time that was then lost. So, yes, when I was growing up, you couldn't binge watch seasons of a show. No one in the world had ever done that then. What got me thinking about this, about binge watching a whole season of a show, is that the BBC have made a new series of Shetland, and they are dropping the 6 episodes, one per week. I've seen 3 episodes so far. There'll be another one next Wednesday. I was late to the party with Shetland. I only started watching it less than a year ago, so I consumed the first 8 seasons at a much faster pace than 1 episode a week. This slow drip feed is very different, and it's nice. I like it. It feels nostalgic, as I suppose you might expect. It made me wonder, do writers know in advance if a show is dropping weekly or the whole season on one day? Does it alter how you write if you know your viewers have a week to think about things in between each episode? It can't make that much difference, surely. A show that drops its seasons all at once will still have viewers who then choose to watch it one per week. And there are others who despise the week-long wait and won't start watching any show until it's all complete and they are free to binge. The streaming services must have a ton of data on this stuff that never gets shared outside their boardrooms. I guess that lets them choose the way each show gets dropped to maximise its views, or to maximise engagement from the fans, or to maximise the new subscribers who sign up to the service just to see that show. Shows that have a pre-existing fandom tend to drop one per week, it seems to me. They want the Star Wars or the Marvel fans buzzing on their socials in between each episode, sharing theories about what they think is going to happen or what the twists or big reveals might be. They want the people who haven't signed up for the service to feel they're missing out. When I rewatch DVDs of shows from the olden days, I very rarely have the discipline to watch just 1 episode a week. I think it's different anyway when you're rewatching rather than seeing a show for the first time. It's not that you remember every episode or every scene, but you know there won't be any big surprises. If they're going to kill off a main character, you'll probably remember in advance. I see parallels to this divide between the pro and anti-bingers when I look back through my history with comic books. When I started collecting, way back in the 1980s, a lot of comic books were written more like soap operas. They had a cast of characters and they told a lot of on-running stories, all intertwined. A monthly issue might cut back and forth between the A-plot, the central story of that month, and various B and C plots, either dealing with the aftermath of what had happened months before or laying down the groundwork for some future story. There are lots of examples of slow-build, long-running plotlines that might not be resolved until years later, simmering in the background, building tension, month after month after month, before finally erupting. A book might get cancelled before these things paid off, and sometimes writers would end up working on a different book entirely, but take the opportunity to drag back in a plot that they've been brewing somewhere else and give some resolution. But all that started changing back in the 80s and the 90s, when comic companies began collecting runs of monthly comics all together as trade paperbacks. It turns out that these sold best when they gathered a run of 5 or 6 consecutive issues that told a single story with a beginning and a middle and an end. Over the years, that became the normal way that comic books were plotted, and popular titles could be guaranteed to always be collected. So there were lots of fans who stopped buying monthly comic books and were waiting for the trades. The collections looked much better on a bookshelf after all. Their spines were wide enough to hold a title. For many years, I mostly stayed true to monthly comics, although I did buy trades for some titles out of the main Marvel continuity. When I stepped away from buying comics, I kept up with a lot of titles by borrowing trade paperbacks from the local library services. This was very like binge watching a series. These were episodes which had originally been monthly comics, but I was reading them all in a row, without the waiting in between each one. Of course, there was then a 6 months wait before the next trade for that title. This helped me kick my comic book habit and was my methadone for several years, but it's not what I do now. There's a service now called Marvel Unlimited, where you pay an annual fee and you get digital access to almost every comic Marvel publishes. You can't read them until 3 months after they've come out in the shops, so you're always technically behind the actual fans, but it's incredibly good value for a man like me who's trying to keep up with old friends on the cheap. So I'm back to reading issues monthly and not waiting for the trades to hit the libraries. 1 episode a month, not waiting and then binging. This slow drip feed is very different, and it's nice. I like it. It feels nostalgic, as I suppose you might expect. Many of us have had the experience on clicking on a title on a streaming service and finding a season when we were expecting a movie, or vice versa. Watching a movie is a very different thing than watching an episode. The writing is structured very differently. A movie audience expects far greater closure, far more finishedness from their endings. It's less like reading comic books and more like reading a novel. But there's one key difference between reading a novel and watching a movie. A movie is fundamentally designed to be consumed all at once, at just one sitting. I get that we all sometimes have to say, I'm shattered and I just can't keep my eyes open, we'll have to finish this tomorrow. But that's not how they're designed. They're meant for cinema, deep in their DNA. They want the big screen and the darkened room. They want to hold you there from start to finish, downed in a single draft. Now, those of you who know me well do know that I do know a woman who might down a book in one. I get that unput down ability is a thing that novels might aspire to, or might claim on their back covers. At the same time, I'm old enough to remember when people used to read books on the train or on the bus. And that tells us something about our brains that's very relevant when thinking about binge watching. It shows how capable we are of picking up a story that we put down days ago and being right back in the moment of it. We pick up where we left off, and we do it fairly seamlessly. Novel writers do put in chapters, and I guess the plan is at the end of every one, a reader gets to choose if they want to step away or if they've time to carry on. Maybe some people never put down books mid-chapter, but I think they're the exception. For many of us, reading gets interrupted by the end of a journey or by the cooker beeping at us to say that dinner's done. We pop in our bookmark, step away for hours or days or weeks, and then we just pick up where we left off. Where were we? It's a question that I used to ask my classes at the beginning of a lesson, when I wanted them to step back in, forget the other subjects that they'd had that morning, and pick up where we'd left off. So maybe there is no fundamental difference between binging a show and watching weekly parts. Maybe our brains just step back in, forget the intervening time, pick up where we'd left off. And maybe next year, I might pick 7 box sets and have a different show for each day of the week. That might be nice. Might feel nostalgic. Maybe. Anyway, that's what I was thinking about, and it felt worth sharing. See you soon.